What does it take to master speedrunning? To go from the novice dying in the tutorial to the pro breaking reality to save a couple seconds? Today, I'm going to find out by learning how to speedrun Celeste in under 50 minutes. I have played Celeste before to almost 100% completion, but that was 6 months ago. So at this point, I've basically forgotten everything. All I really remember is spikes. Spikes everywhere. To make things more interesting, I'm also turning this into a challenge with 2 rules. Rule 1, I only get 10 attempts to beat the game in under 50 minutes. Rule 2, between runs, I can only practice 1 chapter at a time, meaning I'll have to slowly master the game piece by piece and hope I'm thorough enough, because with only 10 attempts for the 7 chapters, I'll barely get a chance to revisit any chapters before the final run. Is a sub 50 run even possible with the rules I put in place? I don't know, but we're about to find out depending how good my first run goes. The first run went about as good as you'd expect. My only 2 goals for it were to relearn how to play the game and at least finish with a time under 2 hours. Not an overly ambitious goal, or at least I thought. The first section is the intro, just a simple path where you learn how to jump and climb walls. Not too hard, and I escaped deathless. That changed immediately in chapter 1. It was the same mechanics as the intro, but with the added challenge of dashes. Not too difficult on their own, but with the addition of the infinite abyss beneath me and spikes everywhere, any mistakes were punished with death, resulting in a lot of time loss. Luckily, it was a pretty short level, so I didn't get beat up too much and finished with a time under 3 minutes with only a handful of deaths. Chapter 2 is where things started slipping, primarily due to the game exploiting my poor playing skills by introducing dream blocks and battling. Dream blocks were fun zipping through to gain speed, but once you entered, there was no turning back, always ending in me realizing, oh look, a wall. Battling, my evil counterpart, was a challenge as well, with her copying my every move. That was alright until I backed myself into a corner with nowhere else to go. Through trial and error, I slowly made my way through the chapter, until I caught a glance of my fellow climber Theo, and thought, sweet, the end of the chapter, just need to talk to him to end it. But after a while, he kept talking my ear off, not letting me escape. And when he finally finished, the chapter wasn't over. So talking to him was completely optional, and I could have given him the good old Irish goodbye. In a panic, I climbed the nearest mountain to my left, hoping to find the end, and unfortunately, that was also optional. So I checked myself off the ledge and eventually found the end of the chapter. Overall, it wasn't too bad with only 13 deaths. I just needed to know where I was going to improve. Chapter 3 is where the run really started collapsing. I met Oshira, the resort's extremely clingy and slightly unhinged manager. He really let the resort go, leaving me with my duty of cleaning up library books, towels, and boxes while dodging sentient dust bunnies with unpredictable movements. Meanwhile, Theo escaped through the vents instead of helping. Honestly, fair. I would do the same if I could have. After tying up the resort and unlocking a few doors, the exit was finally in sight, at least until Oshira decided to block my path with dust bunnies, forcing me to find another way around with even more deadly dust bunnies. Eventually learning from my mistakes and making it to the rooftop for my escape, where Oshira was waiting for me and proceeded to chase me as an angry bobblehead on steroids. I died here a lot, especially on the final rooftop section that was annoyingly long, punishing mistakes with huge setbacks. I finished with a time of 25 minutes, mostly thanks to almost 100 deaths from trying to time dust bunny cycles that felt completely random, locking me into infinite death loops. Chapter 4 did not help, with me getting lost again and even collecting strawberries that I didn't even need. I really don't know why I thought I needed them, but I have them. The wind was unpredictable, with one room pushing me backwards so hard I barely moved. The next, it was at my back, launching me at Mach 10 straight into spikes. Then the snowballs showed up. Don't even get me started. They flew in from off screen and absolutely creamed me in the face multiple times, giving me no chance to avoid them. By the end of the chapter, I already crossed the 50-minute mark, so now even my sub 2 hour goal for the first run was feeling unlikely, but I stayed optimistic. Which was foolish on my part because chapter 5 is a labyrinth, and I had no idea where the exit was, leading to me getting lost in the dark corridors with seemingly infinite paths as I tried to find keys that were almost always in the last place I looked, just like my car keys that have been missing for the last month. I eventually found them all, not my car keys, the ones in the game, along with Theo. Unfortunately, he had been captured by secret guards. Basically, these are eyeballs with anger issues because we trespassed in their temple, leaving it all up to me to save the day, hauling Theo around like a sack of potatoes. He slowed me down quite a bit, making it easy for the seekers to pick me off. But I grudgingly brought him along to the end with the single condition that he would lay off the burritos for the next runs. I started chapter 6 strong by spending 3 full minutes talking to Theo in the intro. Once gameplay started, the game threw everything at me. Feathers with 360-degree movement that somehow steered directly into spikes, Kevin blocks that required precise timing to avoid being turned into a pancake, bumpers that launch you perfectly assuming you actually understood how they worked, and to top it all off, battling came in at the end, combining all of them in a perilous obstacle course, combining technical skill with long rooms without checkpoints to brutally punish every mistake. The only way to escape was by sucker punching her in the face repeatedly. After 11 minutes of torture, I finally defeated her and escaped with my new double dash ability for the final chapter. Going into it, I was optimistic the end was in sight. Oh boy, I was wrong. The final chapter takes every trick, trap, and technique from the previous chapters and reintroduces them with a vengeance. Yes, that does include the satanic dust bunnies from chapter 3. But what are you gonna do? I just had to keep going up and hope the end would eventually come. When I finally drug myself over the finish line, I got a time of 2 hours, 47 minutes, and 32 seconds. Nowhere near the sub 2 hour goal I had for run 1. I knew the first run would be rough, but oh boy. Shaving off 2 hours of time to get my goal of a 50-minute run was looking more like a fantasy. But there were still 9 runs left to make it a reality. For run 2, I chose to go in without turning on any of the chapters. It would have helped for sure, but there was so much wrong with run 1 that I needed to devote my run 2 to just playing the game correctly. I was flying in blind on my first attempt and got lost countless times, along with collecting strawberries that were completely optional and talking to Theo when I could have just avoided him like an introvert at a party. All easy time saves I knew I was capable of. So that's what I did on run 2. Gave Theo the cold shoulder, leaving him to eat marshmallows alone, stumbled through the chapter 5 labyrinth marginally better, and avoided roast strawberries like the plague. Telling myself repeatedly I don't need them, even though the completionist in me really wanted them. With those changes, I got a new PB of 2 hours, 2 minutes, and 37 seconds. 45 whole minutes faster, just for knowing the bare minimum of what I was doing. If I could keep shaving off time like that, maybe a sub 50 was possible. So, where do we go from here? I genuinely didn't know, so I did what every struggling speedrunner does and consulted YouTube. It led me to a guide on how to beat Celeste in under 1 hour. My goal was sub 50 minutes, but I need to start somewhere. Good thing I started here because it was eye-opening to how much I didn't know. There were faster ways to move like supers, quicker routes to take I didn't know existed, and the discovery that Madeline could phase through walls. Yeah, we'll circle back to that one later. For now, all you need to know is what chapters have the biggest potential for time save, so I know at least where to start. Thanks to the video, I got a list of times to hit for each chapter to be at a sub 1 hour pace. I compared those to my run 2 splits, and I did not hit a single one. So to train for run 3, I chose to start on chapter 6 since it had the most time-saving potential. To kick off my training, I had to fix a couple settings first. Screen shake had to go. I was dashing with the screen clarity of a high school fight filmed on potato. That is not good for precise movements. Next, I needed a crouch dash key for some advanced speedrunning strategies, along with more optimized buttons for skipping cutscenes. Yeah, that's apparently possible and pains me to find out now, because there are a lot of them and I wasted so much time. but at least it will be an easy time save now. With all my settings and basic menuing figured out, it was time to start training on Chapter 6. My strategy was playing through every room until I could do it deathless, or at least within a couple tries. To make training a little bit easier, I also installed a mod that let me make custom save states wherever I wanted in the chapter. The first challenge in my practice was optimizing my use of feathers, specifically in the very first room. The goal was to chain them together smoothly, but my turns were way too sharp, killing my momentum and leaving me just short of reaching the next one. But by just rounding the corners more and being precise with my movements, I started linking feathers consistently, saving a few seconds. Next up was Kevin blocks. Punch them in the face and make them mad, and then use their momentum to travel across levels. Not hard in theory, but finding a fast route that was also consistent. That was the challenge. If I was too aggressive, I got crushed. If I was too safe, I was just losing time. But I eventually found a balance that worked for me. After the Kevins came the bumpers. They are finicky with how minor changes in your entry position affect your exit velocity and angle wildly. It took a while to master, but I got accustomed to them. Even though I didn't really fear them anymore, sometimes it was just better to avoid them altogether by taking some shortcuts. This room in particular had 3 potential skips if I dared to brave threading the needle between spikes. The first 2 weren't too risky with some setup moves, but the last one was where it determined if I saved time or got stuck in a death loop. I practiced it for a while, but never got it consistently. Something about having to leap into the channel and letting gravity do most of the work never clicked for me, so I decided to leave it up to chance in the run since I wasn't getting anywhere in practice. After the spike room is the water section that was easy to mess up for the dumbest reason, going too fast. Everywhere else on this chapter, the goal is to go as fast as possible, because it's a speedrun. That's just what you do. But here, the slow viscous water with spikes lining the narrow path don't allow you to do that. So I decided to take it slow and just get it right the first time. After the water section is the battle and fight, the real challenge of this chapter. She fired projectiles and beam attacks at what felt like random intervals, catching me at the worst time while in midair, unable to move. This destroyed me during my last run, and I feared it going into practice. But eventually, I noticed something. Her attacks weren't actually random. Every time I reset my save state, she fired at consistent time intervals. So the randomness wasn't from the game, it was from me running the room inconsistently. So to fix that, I made a save state at the start of every room and kept running them until I could take the fastest route without dying. This way, the whole battle and fight I could just do from pure muscle memory without even worrying about dodging a beam attack or ball of energy. It took hours of practice and many deaths on my first training run through, but I was now confident on where to go and how to tackle every room in Chapter 6. To make sure I was ready, I ran through the chapter from start to finish until I could do it in under 11 minutes to be on sub 1 hour pace. My first attempt was almost 2 minutes over that pace, so there was still some more to learn about chaining rooms together to carry my momentum between them. Once I learned that, I got under my 11-minute goal, and it was time to see if it was repeatable in the real run. For the first part of the run, I was doing pretty good. Between skipping cutscenes and being more confident with my movements, I was flying through them. Chapter 3 was still rough with the dust bunnies out for blood. Oshira didn't help either, shutting down any hope of finishing the rooftop section unscathed when he became an unescapable heat-seeking missile. Chapter 4 and 5 were a little better, with Seekers still finding every opportunity to ruin my day. Skipping the cutscenes was helping a lot to stay on pace. Just by pressing a few buttons, I saved minutes of time. But all my deaths were adding up, and I could tell I was actually somehow behind my run-to time. So Chapter 6 had to be a turning point. I trained for hours learning this chapter, and it was time to see if it would pay off. The first challenge was chaining the feathers together on the first room. I focused on not turning abruptly and doing minimal adjustments side to side. And it all worked just like I practiced, saving me about 5 seconds. Then came the Kevins, and immediately they punished me. I missed my first Kevin ride, then missed the next one trying to go for a faster setup, then died a couple times for good measure. Great start. But after that, something clicked. The rest of the Kevin sections went surprisingly well. Bumper timings were on point, exactly how I practiced them, and I was picking up time, but still felt like I was going too slow. So I pulled out all the stops and went for all the 3 skips on the spike room. The first skip went flawlessly. The second, I chickened out of. And the third, I committed to and got punished for not practicing it more. I just could not thread the needle like I did in practice. And worse, I refused to just skip it because I knew I could do it. But in the long run, I ended up wasting more time than if I just went around. So for the upcoming water section, I played it slow and safe, making it through the first try, dropping into the battle and fight, which would either make or break this run. For a time, everything was working. Attacks barely missed me, my movements were clean, and then one hit landed, making it all fall apart. Somehow her attacks were different all of a sudden, nowhere close to how I practiced. Every movement I made had an attack waiting for me that wasn't there before. I didn't know at the time, but Celeste has 2 modes for every room, an enter cycle and a death cycle for when you die and respawn. It's the same room, just a different spawn point and timer the obstacles work on. I did not practice any of those death cycles and I paid for it. Eventually I dragged what remained of me out of chapter 6 with a time of 14:56. 4 minutes off of my 11-minute goal, but still 2 minutes faster than my run to PB. So even when everything seemed like it was going wrong, I was still doing better than where I started. The last chapter still mercilessly farmed me for kills, racking up my run time by having to respawn so much. I finished with a time of 1 hour, 38 minutes, and 17 seconds at the summit, 25 minutes faster than run 2. This run didn't go as smooth as I would have liked, but it was at least proof that the training was working. For run 4, I set my eye on targeting chapter 3, the one I feared the most. There were 9 minutes of potential time saved based on my last run times, but it wouldn't be easy. Something about the dust bunnies just didn't make sense. Their quick, unpredictable movement always caught me off guard and sent me spiraling into a death loop, making me question if I'd ever escape after minutes of dying in the same spot, bleeding precious time with no escape in sight as the dust bunnies tormented me. But that was going to change. It had to. For my training, I approached it mostly the same as last time, running through every room until I could consistently beat it without dying, but that didn't seem like enough. My problem with all my prior runs was I hesitated before every dust bunny, wasting valuable time. So my goal for each room was to be able to go balls to wall as fast as I could without even thinking about what the dust bunnies were doing. They couldn't stop me if I moved on a planned route faster than they could move to get me. Then I did it again for the death cycle version of every room, so I didn't get a repeat of the battle and fight in my last run. There were subtle differences between the versions, but it was enough to always trip me up. It wasn't always perfect, but with each failed attempt, I learned new techniques and got better at adapting on the fly. Skill that got put to the test when I had to learn the hardest part of chapter 3, Dust Bunny Skip. Remember how Oshira summoned a wall of dust bunnies that looked completely impassable, forced me to go around the long way? That is no longer the solution, because we are speedrunners. The speedrunners defy physics by phasing Madeline through the wall, so I decided to give it a try. Turns out doing a near pixel perfect skip is hard to do, especially when you're not using the crouch dash keybind you set specifically for the skip. It doesn't seem like that would make a difference, but it actually shrinks your hitbox, which on a pixel perfect maneuver is kind of important. With that small change, I started making it into the wall and dying right at the end where I lost too much height. So I adjusted my dashing closer to the peak of my jump to get that extra height, and that was too high. So I needed to find the perfect balance of dashing late enough so my head didn't hit on entry, but early enough to clear the last dust bunny. This balance didn't come easy, but by using the line in the wall to align Madeline's fist for the first jump, and the top of her hair to align the bookshelf in the background to tell me when to dash, I started making it. And to make sure I was consistent, I practiced the skip until I could perform it 5 times in a row. I learned from my poor training on the spike skip in chapter 6 that if I had any inkling of doubt going into the room, I would fail when the time came to perform. Once I hit it for the 5th time in a row, I was off to the hardest segment of chapter 3, Rooftop. This is where most of my time was being wasted, mainly because all the rooms were extremely long with no checkpoints, so if at any point I made a mistake, I had to repeat the entire 20-second long room. As a reference, the gameplay you're seeing is from run 3 on the final room of Rooftop. I died here 15 times, taking me 2.5 minutes on a room that should have been 20 seconds long, 8 times longer than I should have spent here. I could not afford to lose that much time, so for my training to make sure I could run the entire section perfectly, I made the unfortunate decision to reset back to the beginning of not just a room, but the entire rooftop section every time I died until I got through deathless, no matter how long it took. Yeah, I regret my life decisions. That was awful, and for some reason, I willingly put myself through that. But I did at least learn two things. First thing is I now have a vendetta against Oshira for always finding the worst time to charge when I was midair, unable to move. The second thing was it made me realize approaching every room with the mindset of going the fastest, most efficient route didn't always work because I was human. And when I inevitably failed, trying to go right back to the risky, fast route often ended in me dying multiple times, wasting more time than the faster route saved. For all the other rooms I practiced in, there was no pressure to perform well because I could just restart and get it next time. But with the rooftop section where I made death punishment by restarting the entire section, I no longer viewed deaths as acceptable. What was the purpose of running the fastest, riskiest route if you died 3 times? During an official run, that was just wasted time. So from here on out, I made the decision to still train the fastest route for every room. But if I failed on the first attempt in an official run, I would take the slower, safer approach to guarantee I made it through. It took me over 4 hours to realize this and 1,500 plus deaths. But for the first time, I felt confident about playing through Chapter 3 with this new approach. I knew I would make mistakes, and this approach made it so that was okay, and I had a plan if I did. The only way to find out if it worked was to start the official run 4. And it was a night and day difference from how I played previously. Chapter 1 and 2 went cleanly thanks to me no longer hesitating as much with my movements and using every opportunity to dash to gain speed. Chapter 3 went smoothly as well, with the dust bunnies no longer scaring me, thanks to me following my planned routes with ease and skidding by them. I took some extra time at the dust bunny skip, lining myself up to make sure I landed on the first try, and it paid off. I probably could have done it faster, but I most likely would have failed and wasted more time. Rooftop wasn't perfect, with Oshira tripping me up a couple times in the final room, but as I planned, I pivoted and approached it the safer route. It took some extra time, and if I failed, it would have been devastating. But luckily, it paid off, and I finished the chapter 30 seconds slower in order to be on sub 1 hour pace. But that was alright. I could feel the momentum from the fast first 3 chapters as it carried me through the rest of the run. It gave me the confidence to not question my movements and trust my judgment, allowing me to finish with a blistering time of 1 hour, 12 minutes, and 36 seconds. Another 25-minute improvement on my last run. I only planned on cutting 9 minutes from training chapter 3, so the other 16 must have come from my faster movements and my new methodology of playing it safe after I failed the fast strategy on my first attempt. My death count dropping from 288 on run 3 to 141 on this last run reinforced this theory. Since respawning alone takes 3 seconds, so dying 147 less times saved me over 7 minutes in itself without even factoring in having to replay parts of rooms. It was reassuring seeing the new strategy already working. All I had to do now was keep learning the rest of the chapters. For run 5, I set my sights on chapter 5, because even though 7 had more time I could shave off, it would be a fruitless endeavor because I still need to learn the basics of all the chapters before trying to master the harder chapter 7 versions of all of them. So to start off my training, I identified 2 of my major issues. One was getting lost while looking for keys, and the second was the final section where Seekers mercilessly killed me as I lugged Theo to the end. For the keys, there were 4 of them in total, and thanks to the average imposter's sub 1 hour guide, learned that I only needed 1 of them. For that one, I just had to go faster without dying or getting lost. Something quite hard for me, but I think I could manage. For the second key, I could avoid stumbling through dark, sketchy corridors where I was guaranteed to get mugged, because I could instead take this nifty hidden bubble and skip it entirely. For the other 2 keys, there were even more muggers at every corner, shaking me down for everything I had as I fumbled with my keys to unlock doors so I could take a bubble to bypass a deadly alley of spikes. But that sucked. So now, we parkour. Yeah, let me break that down for you. This skip sucked even more than the Dust Bunny one and required something called a reverse super. What that means is you use your down dash button in the opposite direction you want to go, and the instant you hit the wall, turn back to the correct direction, jump to transfer to super speed, to coast over to spikes, and if you time that jump perfectly, you should have your dash restored so you can dash and climb to safety. Easy, right? No, not at all. Jump too early, your dash doesn't refresh and you die. Jump too late and you lose all your speed and die. Do everything right, but zone out at the end forgetting to dash, and you guessed it, you die. Even though it was a risky strategy needing frame perfect timing, it was almost always worth taking, since the alternative of collecting the 2 keys took minutes longer, even if you died 4 or 5 times attempting to skip. So grudgingly, I trained the skip for about an hour until I could land it consistently. I actually didn't mind when it was all said and done, because the skip was fun to do, and in my opinion, easier than Dust Bunny. With the keys now all sorted, it was time to move on to my second issue, Secret Alley. This section at the end of Chapter 5 was just chaos. You're carrying Theo while getting chased by hyper-aggressive eyeballs that could accelerate from 0 to FU in no time. This section reminded me of Rooftop in Chapter 3, with Oshira dashing in a similar way to the Seekers. So I trained it the same way as Rooftop, with me resetting back to the beginning of Secret Alley every time I died until I got a perfect run. Hopefully I don't regret this again. Surprisingly, it only took 30 minutes compared to the hour on Rooftop. Turns out the Seekers were actually quite predictable. They dashed in a straight line, so if you bait it, then step out of the way, you're completely fine. Theo made things slightly worse, not allowing me to dash or climb walls while carrying him. Solution? Throw him like a football, where you're the QB and the long receiver. He can't slow you down if he is soaring through the air while you dash to catch him. Or don't. He doesn't really get hurt either way. That strategy, paired with lots of practice, got me to the end. Whereas, per usual, the final room gave me the most trouble. It was the perfect combination of tight corridors, limiting my movement as a Seeker hunted me, open chasms to jump across while being slowed down by Theo, and worst of all, a block tied to my dash ability at the very end, which always tripped me up, making me easy prey for the Seeker. This is where most of my runs ended, forcing me to restart the whole section from the beginning. It was a pain having to replay through all the rooms, but on the bright side, it forced me to get insanely good at all of them. I eventually made it through the final room, drawing my Chapter 5 training arc to a close as I punched a Master Eyeball in the face. Or the eye, I guess. He doesn't really have a face. Either way, I died enough times to torture myself for long enough, so it was time to see if it paid off in the official Run 5. And somehow, everything worked. Chapter 3 went smoothly with me getting the bunny skip on the first try, along with breaking Oshira's ankles with ease. Chapter 5 went exactly as I practiced, with me making it effortlessly through the corridors without getting lost a single time. Skipping 3 out of 4 keys saved a lot of time, and I even hit the reverse super skip on the first try. So all the practice was paying off. All it came down to now was Secret Alley, and they stood no chance with me predicting their every move like a grandmaster at chess, allowing me to demolish the chapter 22 seconds faster than the sub 1 hour goal time, which honestly blew me away, giving me a dangerous amount of confidence going into chapter 6 that convinced me to full send the triple spike skip room again, mind you, with no additional practice. But apparently, I didn't need it. From dodgy dust bunnies and seekers in my recent training, my movements were steadier and more precise, making the stationary spikes not really even a challenge. I still held my breath and could feel my butt pucker going through, but I managed to make it without dying. I also gave Madeline a run for her money, committing to my movements, blitzing towards her as an unstoppable force. Still had a couple of mistakes, but I held the run together, playing conservative where needed, making a sub 1 hour time actually possible going into chapter 7. But you'd be foolish to think I actually succeeded. I gave it all I had, but it just was not meant to be. I could perform all the basic techniques thanks to learning the other chapters, but had no sense for timing the cycles or what the best path to take was, leading me to make countless mistakes that add up, forcing me to watch as my sub 1 hour goal came and went. I half-heartedly pushed through the rest of the chapter, ending with a PB of 1 hour, 8 minutes, and 17 seconds. Not too far off of sub 1 hour. And after looking at my time splits from the last run, it was clear I was basically there, with chapter 7 having most of the time I had to shave off to get there. So begrudgingly, it was time to train the hardest chapter and see what I could make happen. In all my runs prior, chapter 7 was for some reason much harder than any of the others. That was in part because it was, in fact, more difficult. I also was falling victim to some psychological tricks that played on me since it was the final chapter. Every chapter up to it, I could play with the mindset I was doing the best I can, and if I make a mistake, I make up time by running the rest cleaner. But I can't tell myself that in the final chapter, because now there is no later. And every second matters, directly affecting my final time. All my time saves and clean routing from earlier could be for nothing if I had an awful chapter 7. So I stress myself out, my heart beats out in my chest, and the adrenaline pumping through my veins makes my hands sweaty and shaky. Not ideal for a high precision speed run, always resulting in an abysmal chapter 7 time for an otherwise good run. To overcome this mental block, I needed to be able to perform this chapter flawlessly, so I never doubted myself again, because once I let doubt creep in, that was always my downfall. To get to that level of mastery, I trained each of its 7 sections until I could complete them 3 times in a row without dying. This method worked on the final sections of chapter 3 and 5, so I knew it could work here as well. It would just take some time, but I was more than ready to no longer dread playing through this chapter. And as you can see from the gameplay I've been showing, it has paid off. After 7 hours of throwing myself into the training meat grinder, my movements were quick, precise, and accurate. I had a plan for every room, and it was executed flawlessly. For the most part. For 6 out of 7 sections, I was able to get 3 deathless runs in a row like I wanted, with only the final section being my Achilles heel. I was never able to get a deathless run on the final section, much less 3 of them in a row. The long distance between checkpoints and the tight deadly corridors of blue spikes were the perfect recipe for disaster. I always wanted to go faster to get it over with, but that always led me to making mistakes, forcing me back to the beginning. I eventually had to accept that I couldn't run the final section perfectly, and that was okay because I was leagues better than where I started at the beginning of my training. Perfection would come with time, and I was burnt out on training this chapter, so I had to move on for my own sanity. To finish off my training, I did a single run through to see if I could hit the sub 1 hour benchmark time of 16 minutes 40 seconds, and I did with 20 seconds to spare. So it was time to see if I could pull the whole run together and get my first sub 1 hour time. Chapter 1 went mostly as planned, on par with all my prior runs, and I was feeling good. Chapter 2 was not as clean, with me making some small mistakes here and there, making me feel like I was running behind pace. So going into Chapter 3, I knew I had to be nearly perfect if I was to get back on track. But that wasn't in the cards for me, because Chapter 3 was still inconsistent for me on whether I made a mistake or played it flawlessly. Unfortunately, this time, I made mistakes. One of them that does my skip for this run. In all my prior runs since I trained Chapter 3, I nailed it every time. Didn't know what was different now, but I kept a level head and took it slightly slower on my next attempt and made it through. As for Rooftop, it was the cleanest I had ever played it. There were barely any deaths, and none of them were on the last room. So I felt confident my Chapter 3 time didn't push me too much further off of sub 1 hour pace. Going into Chapter 4, I hoped my practice on Chapter 7 would carry over to here to make up some time. That did not happen, with the snowballs being my main time loss as usual. Especially with this cheeky one at the end of the room, where freedom was in sight. I had no idea how fast Chapter 4 was meant to be, so I was in the dark whether I was behind or ahead of pace. The only thing I knew was going into Chapter 5 was my chance to get ahead. The 3 chapters I hadn't practiced were behind me now, and it was time to break loose in the final 3 I had trained to perfection. And it showed with the Seekers not killing me a single time, although there were a few close calls. But all that mattered was they didn't catch me, and with how good this chapter went, I knew I was back on an hour pace. Chapter 6 did not go as well, with me trying to go too fast on some parts. But for the most part, it was a good run through that didn't hurt my pace. But none of that mattered now because ultimately it all came down to Chapter 7, as it always did. What I had going for me this run was a reference for how long the chapter should take me. I got a time of 16:20 in practice, so judging by the clock, I had some extra time in case I made mistakes. All I had to do was lock in and do exactly what I trained for in practice, and that's exactly what I did. I knew as I was in the final stretch that I had succeeded. The 1 hour boundary was nowhere close to me, with nearly 3 minutes to spare and barely any spikes left to stop me. This whole run was night and day different on how much more fluid my movements were, thanks to me no longer doubting my skills. The numbers speak for themselves, with me running Chapter 7 nearly twice as fast than my previous run. Although this was an exciting achievement, my goal was still a sub 50 minute, so it was time to get back to work and shave off the final 7 minutes. For run 7, I trained Chapter 4 since it had the most time I could save. My main issue here was my slow movements and dodging my enemies, the snowballs. For movement, the plan was simple. If I could super dash, I did. If I could skip the intended route, I did. And if I used a bubble, I fast bubbled. The speed difference is crazy compared to a normal bubble, and not even hard to pull off, saving quite a few seconds a time. Then came the snowballs. They spawned on set cycles, but somehow they always hit me at the worst possible time. So like every seemingly random room before, I planned a consistent route to remove the randomness, so snowballs became airballs, whizzing by me as I left them in the dust. Overall, Chapter 4 wasn't too hard to learn, with it being quite short, only taking an hour and a half to get the routing down and feel ready enough to give my run 7 a shot, where the end results were mixed. In the run, Chapter 4 alone went amazingly, with me beating it nearly 2 minutes faster than I had ever ran it. Mostly thanks to my newfound ability to dodge snowballs with ease, allowing me to make it through with 4 times fewer deaths than typical. So my practice on Chapter 4 went great and actually paid off. Unfortunately, that didn't help me with the rest of the chapters that were riddled with mistakes. Eating up my 2 minutes of time saved to the point that I ended with a time of 57.23, which was 4 seconds slower than my last run. Not what I wanted to see, but I knew my issue this run was with consistency, and that would come with time. Unfortunately, I was running out of it. The next time save opportunity was Chapter 2. To save that time, I took cleaner entries and drain blocks so I could chain them together instead of wasting time readjusting Madeline to avoid hitting walls. I also started taking riskier routes to skip the intended path of rooms that was slower. This helped me avoid Madeline as well, because by taking the faster, more optimal route, I backtracked less, so Madeline didn't even get the chance to trip me up. Then of course I added super dashes everywhere. If there was ground, I was gone. This chapter gave me a lot of practice with them, so going into run 8, I started applying supers anywhere there was a straight stretch to save a couple of seconds across the whole run. And it paid off with me getting a run 8 time of 53 minutes 30 seconds, a 4-minute improvement from my last run. A welcoming sight, putting a rest to my concerns of my speedrun time plateauing like my last run. Progress was for sure slowing across the board on all the chapters, but improvements were still being made. In this run's case, I fully embraced applying super dashes everywhere there was wide open ground to gain speed. I just had to find more universal skills like that, and I knew a sub 50 was in sight. The only chapter left to train was Chapter 1, and at best there were 50 seconds to save. Not much, but I needed everything, so I learned how to wave dash. Wave dashing is when you diagonally dash into the ground, followed by a jump to get a speed boost, and your dash restored. With this new technique, I could skip the majority of 2 rooms entirely. In run 9, this allowed me to save 20 seconds on Chapter 1. That unfortunately didn't translate to my final time. That was only 3 seconds faster than run 8. I was still improving with my overall death count constantly dropping from run to run, but it just wasn't fast enough. My 10 run limit had caught up to me, and if I was to make a sub 50 happen, there had to be a major breakthrough in the last training arc. Unfortunately, I wasn't sure what there was even left to do. This was it. Final attempt, and I had to choose wisely where to train for it. To figure that out, I compared my run 9 splits to the sub 60 pace benchmarks, and I was destroying it, as I should, since my goal was a sub 50. So I swapped in the sub 50 benchmark times, and they told a different story, with only 2 of the 7 chapters on pace, meaning I needed to get better across the board, but I couldn't train everywhere because of a stupid rule somebody put in place. So grudgingly, I knew that meant going back to Chapter 7, the place every run lives or dies. It has every aspect of the other chapters, just harder, so if I could master this chapter, there was nothing any of them could throw at me that I didn't know. So I got to work. Run after run, death after death, learning every room, every movement, every input. I left nothing to chance, obsessing over perfection and complete mastery. And I achieved it. After 12.5 hours and over 3,000 more deaths, There was nothing left to learn. I was no longer the clueless novice getting lost in every chapter, going on strawberry picking escapades. I had come so far in my progression, and it was time to commit to the final run and see if I was worthy of my sub 50-minute dream. I went into this run the same as all the others, filled with optimism that everything would go as planned. And for the first chapter, it did, but something felt off. All the rooms were the same ones I had been practicing for weeks on end. Same deadly spikes blocking my path, same gaping pit wanting me to fall in, same everything. Except for me. The difference was every action was just happening. I wasn't thinking about inputs anymore. No more press thumb on space to jump, no press X to dash. I was just thinking of movements and they happened. The best way I can describe it is like walking. You don't think about lifting and swinging your legs to make a step. You just move. Then if a rabid dog pops out behind you, you break into a sprint just thinking I got to go fast. And that's how the game felt. My scrambled thoughts of remembering routes and mashing buttons was no longer there. Instead, I was left with an eerie silence as I watched the gameplay just happen. I was in this peaceful zen state for a while, hoping I could coast to the end of the run carefree, but my body had other plans. I was pulled back into reality when I stupidly thought, my heart has been pretty chill so far. And then boom, I feel it ramp up in speed almost instantly. Why did I have to remember it was there? I thought we had an agreement and that everything would be fine. As my heart rate climbed, my palms got sweaty, fingers got shaky, and I had to start focusing on what I was doing to make sure I didn't fumble. I couldn't tell if all this was from excitement or dread, but I did realize this feeling wasn't foreign. I knew exactly where it was from. It was the same feeling 7 years ago when I speedran Celeste Classic in high school. Simpler version of this game, capable of running on basically anything, even the Chromebook. I would speedrun the game during passing period between classes, either racing my friend who got me into it, or chasing a personal best time, trying to get to the summit before class started. And every time I got close, my heart would do exactly this, beating on my chest wanting me to stop. And it ended one of two ways. Either I spiraled out of control and fell off PB pace, or I locked in and got the job done. I always hoped for the second option. I had no control over that. It was a mental endurance battle, and I didn't know how many rounds I had to last. But I did. Whole sections went by and I don't even remember playing them. I died in these rooms hundreds of times. Learned every mistake the hard way, and with quick glances at the clock every now and then I could tell I was staying on pace. I was winning the fight against my shaking body and my doubtful mind. Everything was going as planned. Even the final chapter was nearly deathless. The spikes I had feared for so long were just side characters not worth a second glance. I could tell I was slipping near the end. My movements got shakier, timings were off. The little calm I had left was turning into panic as I saw the timer ticking closer to 50 minutes. Every mistake cost seconds I didn't have, and it all came to a head at the second to last checkpoint. The last difficult spike section before I was home free to scramble to the summit. Part I almost never messed up, but this time I missed the final dash to get around the spike ledge. I had some time to reattempt, but being at 49 minutes, I didn't have much. I was spiraling with my frantic attempts when all I needed was a single good one. In the back of my mind, I knew this was it. I died, my sub 50-minute window would pass. And I finally cleared it. My heart felt like it was about to explode, fighting for my attention to calm down, but it would have to wait. I needed to clear the final section before I could relax. Even without any mistakes, I wasn't sure if I had enough time. All I could do was scramble to the top and hope for the best. Thankfully, fate was on my side, and with seconds to spare, I got a sub 50-minute run. It actually happened. I beat the challenge despite all the odds. As my celebration, I did nothing. What was there to even say? For me, the events of this video took place over the course of a month, with me taking time after a long day of work to gradually work towards this ambitious goal. This run meant everything to me, beyond what words can even begin to describe. My time is by no means good compared to thousands of other people, but for me, it's perfect. All I care about is being proud of the person I am today and push myself to be the best version of me for tomorrow. And for me, that's what speedrunning is all about. Thank you everyone for joining me on my journey. If you want to see my uncut sub 50-minute run, I've got the video here with some behind the scenes commentary. Otherwise, here's a video that YouTube thinks you'll like. Thanks again everyone for joining me today, and consider subscribing so you don't miss any of my future videos. Oh, and I did finally find my car keys, so no need to worry about that.